All right. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm excited to have this roundtable discussion. I've been waiting for this for a little while. I think let's just get started into introductions. Rafiwa, do you want to start? You're on mute.
Yeah. Wow, so much pressure actually. Yeah, I'll go ahead. So my name is Rafiwa Noganta. I'm currently based in South Africa. I'm a data scientist by profession, also data analyst. So basically, I've been within this role for like a little bit over 3 years now. So I started working within the market research at AC Nielsen, like a global market research company, where I was actually responsible for handling over like the RMS side of the business within South Africa. And I was also supporting some of the countries, working with other people within different countries, i.e. India, Indonesia, some of the big guys from Nigeria, and also looking over the market aspect of South Africa in general. Now I'm currently I'm currently an data analyst within Genex Insight of the business of IQ Business. Where I'm also still looking at the market research aspect of things. And I hold the BSc in Mathematical Statistics and Information Systems.
Thanks. Khanya, you want to take it next?
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Khanyisa Noganta, but everyone calls me Kanye, like Kanye West. I'm from South Africa, originally from the Eastern Cape. So by profession, I'm a data scientist for one of the big 4 banks, where I basically support audit from a data science side. And then prior to that, okay, so I've been in this role for like over a year now. And then prior to that, I worked at AB InBev, where I was an analytics lead for Africa Zone. So basically, we had a centralized data science team, which was based in India. So basically, I was responsible for managing that team and also managing any analytics roles throughout Africa. And yeah, prior to that, I was a quantitative analyst. So yeah, study-wise, I hold a BSc in mathematics and statistics and an honors degree in computational finance. And I'm currently completing my master's in big data science.
Whoa, okay. that's quite an intro. Congrats on all of that. Dumebi.
Hi guys, so my name is Dumebi Okwechime. I am the Chief Data Officer at Kobo 360. Prior to that, I was Chief Decision Scientist at RentMoney. I too am a data scientist by profession. My introduction to data science was via the PhD I did in machine vision. So that's machine intelligence, but for cameras, traditionally called computer vision. And that led me into sort of a string of professions, mostly around fintech. And I've also spent some time in financial crime, as well as a lot of my time in consulting for major banks for building sort of AI and data analytics solutions to help improve their business and operations. I'm also an angel investor at the Gradient Boost. I find it very important to provide, particularly in the African market, tools and resources for young professionals to develop their data science skills and make them very well equipped for prospective jobs in the market. I see the market growing considerably for data scientists. I see the demand growing. And if anything, I believe that the potential impact of data science is a lot greater in emerging markets because there's such a lack of infrastructure that data science can leapfrog a lot of that requirements, right? So what the Gradient Boost does is particularly interesting to me. And yeah, so that's my background.
Great, thanks. Okay, so no offense to anyone else, but Kanye, I really have questions about your background and all of that. But just to jump in based off what Dumebi said, do you feel like you've also seen that, talent gap? You said you worked on, that analytics sector throughout the whole of the continent. So what have you seen overall in terms of data and companies being data enabled or not?
Okay, so on my side, so what I've seen is that basically in South Africa is more mature, right, when it comes to the data element. But in other countries like your West Africa and East Africa, I think they are getting there. But this is at the time that I was looking at that portfolio, and with so many things changing, I think they have made, some improvements. So basically, we did struggle when it came to collecting data and doing any analytics. So we kind of like had to change our strategy from a data collection perspective, so that we could provide those insights, which then tie in with the company's strategy, so that at least we have something and data analytics based decisions to move forward. So yeah.
And then would you say that with what you've seen, I mean, do you work with like mostly other larger clients, smaller clients, and in terms of that like spread, have you noticed a specific distribution in terms of the challenges across the size of the clients that you worked with?
So by clients, what would that entail? Because I was, yeah.
Yeah, basically the customers.
Oh, the customers. So remember, I worked for AB InBev, right? So AB InBev was formerly, it was SAB. So we were looking at that portfolio, right? But for Africa. So basically, I would interact with all the people who work for AB InBev in Nigeria and in Tanzania. So there were people who were leading those portfolios as well. And this is where we would like have to discuss, data analytics driven strategies, how to collect data, how we can sort of manipulate ways into getting that type of data, so that we do make those actionable insights and decisions. So yeah, it was basically across dealing with different people who manage those portfolios from those respective countries. But yeah, it wasn't so tough, but it was tough. But yeah, I'm sure they are at a better position than they were, because that was in 2019 that I stopped working there. So yeah, I think they are in a much better position compared to them.
Maybe that looked like that resonated with you a little bit.
Yeah.
You're on mute.
He's still
on the final button. Yeah, so I completely agree. I think there's a lot of growth that can still happen, but there's a lot of particularly in certain African nations, there's a lot of progress that's been made. And if you were to really look, there are specific companies that have made great strides in the industry, and it's just about enough people, enough companies watching these leaders and saying, right, wow, they've managed to scale their business because they've invested quite well in data science. I'm going to copy that. And it's just a case of the matter of time for enough people to see that progression, growth, and opportunity for everyone to follow suit, and it becomes a standard in the market. So it's all heading in the right direction.
Rafiwa, any thoughts?
I mean, most definitely. I mean, I've seen quite a huge improvement that has been made within Africa in general, in terms of how we look at data and aspects in terms of how we actually collect the data in any way possible. I mean, coming from a market research perspective, one thing that really interests me was looking at how different ways of how we were actually collecting the data, given the global pandemic that actually came, that actually affected everyone. But looking at how different markets, and also actually at Nielsen, during my last months of being at Nielsen, seeing other countries within Africa coming up with different ways of actually how they could actually collect the data during the time, and actually how they could actually come about and analyze the data. So I would say that we are really making a huge progress in Africa in general, in terms of how we look at the data and actually understanding the importance of data science in general. So in that way, we still have a long way to go in any way possible. But to look at South Africa only in general, as I just recently read an article that Capitec had actually invested a lot of money within the Western Cape University to actually empower data science. So things like that that are actually happening within Africa, then that's where you now just realize that, you know what, we actually are stepping towards the right direction in terms of understanding the importance of data and actually understanding the importance of actually big data in general. So it actually gives us a fair hope that, you know what, we are moving towards this right direction in terms of realizing that the fourth industrial revolution is actually taking place, and that's the big thing that is actually happening right now. So seeing those things is actually,
Yeah, and if I can just add to that, Rafiwa, I do remember that we were basically working with Nielsen's data, right? And the challenge that we also had there was that the data collection is based on a sample. Now, we don't know how much of that sample actually covers the market. So those were like some of the challenges that we had. And when the data was released, I think it was like a year, like there was a year lag or something like that. So we had to do things like extrapolation, just to sort of get, you know, the accuracy in terms of those markets. So yeah, so those are actually the data challenges that we've experienced. But when Rafiwa touches up upon that point, that from a research perspective, then there's that growth, then it's really great to hear. So yeah.
That's actually a good point, right? I worked a little bit on the SA and on the SAB accounts, but I wasn't really big on the liquor side of the business. I was actually big in the tobacco, the CPS, as well as some of the FMCG aspects. Yeah, but I mean, the data that we used to get, I'm not so sure how much I would actually have to share. I mean, due to company policies and all those kind of stuff. But then how it actually works within our side, yes, we work on a sample-based perspective, and we have a really, really good team of data scientists and data and statisticians that actually works on the sample itself and actually extrapolate it to actually represent the overall South Africa. And also, if we're looking at it from a country-to-country perspective, because I mean, SAB is actually quite big, right? I mean, we've got other markets within the rest of Africa and all those kind of stuff. So I would say, I would go to an extent that it's really, really accurate, to be quite honest with you. But there are other aspects that, of course, there are a level of errors within the data, purely based on the fact that everything is actually sample based and all those kind of stuff. Yes, ideally, maybe to a certain extent, depending on what you guys are actually looking at, you might actually have to do a little bit of digging within from an insights perspective. But to be quite honest with you, the data that we actually worked with, it's quite big. It's quite rich in terms of you could there's a potential of actually using a lot of insights within the data that we actually collect and actually report on. From an extrapolation perspective, a lot of things that have been done when we're looking at different types of ways that we actually stratify the data and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of improvements when it comes to like designing how our product should actually look like from an enhancement perspective, and also how do we well define how we actually want to actually report to a client perspective. I mean, yeah, and looking at it from that way.
Yeah. I mean, it's all heading in the right direction in my view. You can imagine, for example, roads didn't improve until cars became more popular. In the same way as the sample data you use, as it generates insight, whatever technique is used to kind of extrapolate and make that data a representative of the sample, of the total sample, you find that the insights get generated, company sees value, they're like, do you know what, we're going to collect better data. And over time, that then goes into a bigger sample, and over time, that becomes an entirety of the data. So what you're witnessing there, which is very encouraging, is the maturity of the market in that direction. It may take time, And to both your points, sampling, although it's not perfect, is a very, very good start. In fact, you might find that some companies and some industries even struggle to get a reasonably good sample. There's obviously no guarantee that sample is a true reflection of the population, but at the very least, it gives you a guide that this is heading in the right direction. So it's all positive, and it's encouraging.
So with that positive outlook, what do you think comes next? In terms of like the next, like, and I don't mean long-term, I mean like actionable next steps.
Straight up there. So if I can jump in there, so you get your stage 1, you get your samples. Stage 2, you go through the painstaking, because I know Kanye was very very kind in how she mentioned sort of the techniques, but it's actually very rigorous and can be very cumbersome to really generate and extrapolate data. So you go through that arduous process of extrapolating and generate insights. If not already done, the business learns the value of that insight, and then everything else goes back to the data. So how do we make that data better? So the assumptions, so the extrapolation process is simpler to then generate more insights. So really the difficulty in this process is to make sure that those insights are presented well and the business sees the value, because only then does the investment come back into the data to kind of get that machine moving. I don't know if you guys would agree.
I completely agree, because it actually outlines the statistics dogma, right? Behind everything else. I mean, from the data collection perspective, to how we actually define our sample in any way possible, different ways that we would actually be looking at how we're actually defining the sample and all those kind of stuff, the statistics behind how we're actually defining our sample, and also after the analysis and all those kind of stuff that we would actually want to do on the data, your machine learning, your predictives, and all those kind of stuff. One of the most important aspects within the statistics dogma is the data inference, right? Making sure that whatever that we're actually reporting from a sample perspective, how is it correlated to our overall population in any way possible? And also, one thing that I've actually realized that it's very, very important coming from a data science perspective is to not really get lost in the data, right? I mean, people tend to think that, you know what, the more data that we tend to have, the better the outcome could be in any way possible. But however, that doesn't always really apply when you're doing your different models within the data, when you're actually analyzing the data or trying to solve a problem within the data, i.e. why is it that our share actually dropped? Why is that actually our customers are not really buying our product and those kind of stuff? People tend to just get lost with a lot of variables that actually comes in within the data. Those are different aspects that we need to look at, and you really, really need to be actually mindful of. And also the reporting part of the data in any way possible. You might have a really good analysis on the data that you actually have. Everything seems to be right. You have actually eliminated most level of errors and all those kind of stuff. But then making sure that you know what are we actually reporting on? I mean, are we trying to make the result that we actually have as simple as possible? What is actually our target market in terms of the issues that we're actually trying to resolve? So there are a lot of things that you would actually have to be mindful of when you're actually looking at the data and looking at different ways to actually improve the data. I mean, sometimes you might find out that maybe you actually spend months and months actually trying to investigate what could have possibly went wrong within the data. You look at all the possible things that you have actually done, from the collection to reporting and to all of those kind of stuff, but then only to find out that probably maybe the way that you're actually addressing your target is actually not really in a way that they could actually receive the level of output the way that you trying to address the problem statement or the issue. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is sort of where the data science skill or the data analytics skill comes in, right? Because anybody can learn how to be a data scientist, but it's all about the practicality of it. And with that, as much as there's the technical aspect, with that comes the human intelligence, where you sort of have to say, okay, this is what is sitting in front of me. How can I make this more useful? And how am I actually going to represent the outcome of this thing? So you sort of like have to say what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. Okay, try different aspects of things so that you can get to the bottom of something and actually represent something that is more meaningful. Because remember, you can be as technical as you can be, but you still need that, you know, intelligence in terms of explaining these insights to an audience that doesn't specifically understand, you know, the deeper depth when it comes to data.
Yeah, so I think you're both speaking on exactly the same point in two different angles, and I think a lot of that is just making sure leadership understands the process and understands the value proposition of data science. I have come across multiple times the misconception that, hey, you've added more, we've collected data for the past 6 months. Now you're going to add in the 6 months data. You're going to be in a stronger position for your analytical work. But not always the case. It depends on the problem you're solving, and depends on what the data is doing, right? Because it doesn't always add value when you add more data, to Rohiwa's point. And absolutely, collecting data and doing analytics for analytical purposes has no value to any business. It can be very difficult to connect analytical work and insights to a business agenda, very difficult. And also that leads to a lot of misconceptions. I have seen data science promises made on data science that is beyond the capabilities of technology right now. And it's all about bridging that misunderstanding to the point that whatever is being done can be applied practically. And that's really hard, that practical element, because you're there correcting misconceptions with what can actually be applied and to bring value in your business. Because you have some results that don't work today, doesn't mean that it's failed. It just means that it's an iterative process which takes time to improve, right? So it means that you don't get your right answer from day one, but it might improve with time as you start to work on it and get more data. Data science has a lot of capabilities, but it won't necessarily mean that you can drop your workforce by 50%. It might mean that your team is more productive, so their time is more efficient, but it may not necessarily mean that you can get rid of everyone and the machine will do everything. So there's a long discussion. So what's great about consulting, in my time consulting, is if the success of the project really depends a lot on those initial workshops and initial discussions, because a significant percentage of the work is just based on aligning the business to the technology. And once you got that down, then everything aligns, and you've got a more likely successful outcome. And of course, the expectations are managed to how long it takes for you to get really the results you need to get your business going. So I'm just going to summarize that with just enough time spent in leadership to interpret the value that data science can bring the business.
In more simpler terms, don't think that data scientists are actually the Supermans of the business in any way possible. I think, yeah.
I think magic is what I always refer as with the magicians. You can't make things happen just like that. And I think what's really cool, and I guess it's also a process that has to happen in Africa, but also one that can be very challenging. Not only to obviously managing those expectations, but you find that a lot of the data science challenges are ones that haven't really been fully explored in the market. Obviously, you take things like fintech, and that's obviously fairly mature because it's mature in other markets. Fintech and data science kind of go hand to hand very well. But when you start to apply data science, to very unique problems in Africa, that's kind of where all of this is heading. That's why we're all here, and that's why we're all excited about the prospects. But it means that you're now stretching beyond what we've seen before. So there's a certain level of patience that needs to happen with getting data science to where it needs to be. And I think it's kind of already happening. A lot of the problems, and I've already kind of discussed that subtly, is data. But the second problem is patience, right? In my view, data science will have a very profound impact in emerging markets. But there's so much that's missing that needs to be worked on over time to get us where data science can be really applied to very unique Africa problems, to really get it to the point that is bringing great value to the country and to businesses. So there's obviously a unique element to that as well. So it's essentially I'm very optimistic about about sort of how data science is being applied to different problems in Africa. Very encouraged that the community is growing and the leadership is growing to the point that there is going to be that patience and that investment in the industry to get it where it needs to be to solve those unique problems. But yeah.
So speaking of which, we always hear about the skills gap in data science, but we hear about the hype of data science too, and people moving to boot camps trying to learn data science, and the emergence of many boot camps around the world in general. So my question is that from both the Nigerian and South African perspective, is it an issue of a skills gap or an issue of a gap for experienced hires? What's the actual issue? Do you want to go first, Kanye?
Okay, no, I just wanted to actually say upon one of the things that maybe touched upon. It's also important, right, to have the right leaders in the room, right? Because you would get someone who wants a data scientist with 8 years experience doing this and doing that, with, you know, NLP, machine learning and all these things, but do they really understand that? And also looking at the maturity of data, is it really possible to get someone who has 8 years experience in machine learning in South Africa? And also you may find that you can have the right team, right, with the right skills, but if you don't have the right leader, then your data aspects are as good as really nothing, because remember, there will be a miscommunication there and somewhere. So yeah, it's important to have the right leaders as well, because then you sort of gonna experience all these things, and yeah, it becomes a problem. But I think from a skills perspective, we do have people with the right skills. But we also just need to make sure that when we get someone to be a leader, we are getting the right people to be leaders and lead these people in the right direction, so that you can see the magic.
What are the current resources do you think that executives have for upskilling when it comes to data? Or what do you feel like there could be more done?
There are very few formal courses for data science leadership, because even data science in the commercial market, in the popular market, is still fairly new and not necessarily mature enough to really see a leader come from, you know, the beginning to the end, so to speak. So basically starting as a data science, then leading a data science team, because there's so many different cocktails of growth that needs to happen to get there. So a simple example would be, obviously, when it comes to technical roles like data science, are you the kind of person that enjoys being in front of your laptop, writing maths, developing code? And how do you then take that person and make them step back from that exciting work and then try to understand the business perspective, to then merge that with the technology perspective and create that magic? That transition is a very difficult one. It's definitely one that's becoming more accepted in the industry, but it's such a delicate balance, because you might find someone more inclined towards technology and someone more inclined to the business. So depending on the business, there needs to be a right balance of both. But when you have someone like that in the business, then you've got a significant way there. But if you're a business that wants to leverage data science, so you literally have had no exposure to data science, there's not many resources out there for them to kind of upskill. Because the question now becomes, how far do they need to know? Do they need to know that these things will give you great value? Do they need to know a little bit more about it? Do they need to know what data they need? Do they need to know what infrastructure they need? Do they need to know how long it will take to develop that capability and that skill and that insight? Because every business is different for data science. So the only way that I've seen it really work is when there's a leadership support given to the leaders. And what that means is there's some form of either consulting or some form of leadership hire that comes in that guides the business towards that objective. Because although you can provide a leadership team a course, hey, crash course in data science, here you go, there's still an element of guiding through that process for a period of time. And because the process is really what data science is a process. It's not a, here's data science and bye. It's more like, here's the beginning of the data science journey, and here is a destination that you want to get to. So essentially, it's a combination, in my view, a combination of sort of a preliminary but preliminary awareness of sort of how data science can help your business. And that can be done in a sort of a workshop manner. And then it is a guide, a leadership guide through that process. So there's an understanding of sort of the end to end. Then after that, and that takes some time, quite a bit of an investment, a couple of months. And sort of when the business understands, what, data science is not magic. Data science takes time. Data science requires investment in infrastructure, in skills, in business strategy. Then that's kind of when all the dots connect. And that's kind of, in my view, that's why it's not so easy to sort of click a finger and boom, you've got a data science team that's functional. And that's why only real companies that have quite a significant amount of financial capabilities, and that's why fintech has done so well, it's because it comes with a significant investment of time and money and patience. So, I guess to summarize my point, there is a way. It's not like technology. It's not like a course that just ends it all. It's a combination of awareness and a guide, and also the business being patient enough to kind of go through that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. Because to be quite honest with you, I found it recently. I've been finding a lot of companies not necessarily understanding what is it that they actually need. Sometimes you'd find out that they are saying that they actually need a data scientist, but in essence, the content in terms of what you're actually doing on a day-to-day basis, that's a job of a data engineer. That's a job of a data analyst. That's a job of business intelligence. That's actually a job of a statistician, and all those kind of stuff. In terms of awareness, that's something that of which we know the technical aspect behind what we actually do on a day-to-day basis. We know the differences in between all those career paths, although they somehow they actually correlate with one another. I mean, an awareness from that perspective, because to be quite honest with you, data science are really, really expensive to actually hire within the business. But then what's the use of you hiring someone who's really, really expensive, but then you don't really understand what is it actually coming in board and actually going to be doing from a business perspective. So those are the things that we are in it, and we need to now start raising awareness in terms of educating the corporate sectors in terms of we understand that this is actually how your data actually looks like. Before you actually hire a data scientist, you need to actually now go back to do your ETL. You need to actually clean your data. You need to do your data warehouse infrastructure, and all those kind of stuff. So before you're actually taking a little bit step forward into getting a data scientist, you need to get now a data engineer, or someone of which is going to be able to actually understand your data and rearrange your data in any way possible. Only then, that's when you'll actually, you know what, let me go out there and look for a data scientist. However, when data scientists come in board, don't expect that person to be going around and actually be building reports for you, and all those kind of stuff, because that's really, really isn't what we actually do. And to be quite honest with you, when other people get to be moved from what they actually do to actually something else that you actually want them to actually do just because that's how your company is looking like and all this kind of stuff, you need to understand they actually get bored. That is why you find a lot of data scientists when it comes to startup companies, they don't really stay there for the longest time because they're actually being exposed to something that they don't really do in any way possible. And again, just to touch base in terms of the question that Emmanuel had raised, looking at the hiring structure of data scientists within South Africa and all those kind of stuff. Last month, I saw this other post on LinkedIn where they were looking for a data scientist, and the prerequisite of that job title entails someone who is really, really experienced when it comes to the field, and all this kind of stuff. And it got me thinking that, you know what, there are either two ways that that both parties need to actually do. I mean, me as someone who's actually looking for an entry-level job, I need to now look at different things of how to actually now do certain projects on the outside, which is something that we actually offer from a graduate post perspective. How do I now I know I'm very I'm data driven, I'm number driven. How do I now look at probably maybe approaching different stores within your rural area, saying that, you know what, go to that one store and be like, guys, I can actually collect the data from maybe 3 or 4 stores and actually have a mini sample for like us as a mini project for you and all those kind of stuff to a point where you could actually extrapolate that and be like, guys, this is how I could actually report for you. This is how you could actually beat your competitors and all those kind of stuff. Projects like that are very, very important. And also on the other part, the companies need to actually go to a point where probably they go back and actually reinvest on the talent that they would actually need in future and all those kind of stuff. That's where now the government also needs to now start getting involved in such things as saying that, you know what, we know that there's going to be a need for us to actually get data scientists. There's a need for us to actually move towards the fourth industrial revolution, where we're using big data. We need someone that actually understands your machine learning, someone actually understands the computational aspect behind everything that we tend to do. So that's where we now need to actually start working together from a country perspective to try and understand how do we now move forward? How do we now empower young people so that they could actually jump into this career path? So yeah.
Yeah, and like it's really, really easy to get lost with the buzzwords, right? People are talking robotics, they're talking data scientists, they're talking this, they're talking that. So actually, if you don't really understand the industry, then it can get easy for you to get lost and sort of go astray. So yeah, to Rufiwa's point, I think to get the right people in the room, because yourself as a leader as well, you may think that this is what's best for your team. And at the end of the day, you may actually be frustrating those data scientists and those data analysts, because really it's not what they're doing versus their skills is not really, matched. So yeah, I actually agree with you on that you actually need to get all these parties in a room and sort of have a way going forward in terms of how to, sort these issues out, because you see it a lot in corporate, where people are frustrated because I'm a data scientist, but I do reporting, versus what the role had advertised to say, okay, no, we want someone who's going to be building and sampling models for us, your neural networks and all these things. And then at the end of the day, you find that, no, actually, this is not what I'm here to do. So yeah.
It's all your dreams.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like a Swiss Army knife, right? In my honest opinion, because there are so many functionalities in there. I just want to be able to cut a grape, but it also comes with a lot of things, because let's face it, data scientists can do data engineering and can do reports. It's within the skill set. It's a small fraction of the skill set, but still within the skill set. So you have a business that has an army knife and they only want to do one of its capabilities, but don't understand the rest. They're not going to venture into those things, particularly if they don't know how to use them. So yeah, to both your points, it's all about making them aware, because it could just be that they just need someone to do reporting. They don't actually need a data scientist. They don't need to spend the money on that resource. And it could just be a case of just making sure they're aware that it's a buzzword, data science, but your business may not actually need that or be ready for it yet. Yeah.
Sure.
And what about the smaller companies? So it kind of sounds like it's like almost like a chicken and an egg problem when for like a SME or a smaller startup or a smaller company, you feel like you want to start, like you're generating data and you want to start using it, but then you don't know who to bring in, but you don't have the resources to kind of afford the investment of the resources to tell you who to bring in. So it's like, so where do you move from there?
Yeah, so it's definitely a chicken and egg thing. Definitely, it's a case of, is it that you need to use the data to then work out that the insights you get to need the resources to work on the data to then generate insights. So and you might find that different companies are in different positions in that journey. They don't have the data, but they do have a business that can clearly have a data science link, or they don't have a business clear data science link, but they don't have the data, but they want to explore and learn more. And in fact, you might find the market is full of companies that just want to explore and learn more, particularly in a climate like this where there's so much uncertainty. Can we get more from our data? Literally, every business can have a data science angle. It's just a case of making sure they are identifying that clearly and they're utilizing it clearly. So yeah, it's again, it's just a case of really going through the right process of identifying what your business needs and how data science can support it, because sometimes it may not necessarily be a data science channel.
Just a question to you from my end, right? I mean, from a startup perspective, to which point do you think that a company would actually require a data scientist? I mean, is there such a thing as, is our data enough for us to actually hire a data scientist or rather data analyst and all those kind of stuff? I mean, to which point do now startups need to actually now bring into a professional data scientist who can look?
If I was to jump in, so it depends on the unique proposition, right? Unique selling proposition. If the business core value has a data science impact or data science contribution, then they need data science from day one. But if a business can actually provide its USP and even generate revenue, then arguably that's a most cost-effective start, and then bringing the data science to bolster, optimize that business later on. In fact, that would be the most ideal case, because then that means your business has opportunity to prove its value proposition and then have data science push it further. So I think in my view, it just depends on what the business is and what its unique selling proposition is.
Any thoughts, Khanyisa?
No, yeah, no, definitely. I agree with what Dumebi has said. It's based on, you know, the company needs and, you know, the maturity of the company and their maturity in terms of data as well. So absolutely.
I'd say one thing that's interesting from my perspective that I didn't know, I didn't realize that corporates had similar challenges. I kind of just thought that you got the money, you got the team, it's all good. I definitely learned something there. I found that kind of surprising, to be honest.
Yeah, I would say they have the biggest challenge actually, because it's not just a case of trying to build up data science team. They have a bigger job to change the culture of a whole company if they want to truly leverage data science. The companies that have been most successful in adopting data science are the ones that have been most capable of realigning the business to be data-driven. And that is such a difficult process, because you're getting people to stop trusting their gut, stop trusting subjectivity, and just trust data. And almost sometimes it feels a bit blindly. Data says X, so you have to do X, but why? I've had years of experience. I've seen this before. You cannot substitute experience for data. But you can, because experience sometimes comes with a lot of subjectivity that gets you in trouble later on. Because you've seen things work a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that they will always work that way and will always give you the same results. So data essentially is a sensible guide to experience, but you cannot cut it out entirely and just expect experience to carry the rest of the way. So having to train a company, particularly a big company, how to trust data to that extent can be very difficult. And also it's more time consuming. If you can imagine, let's say you're a marketing company and you want to use data to work out if your marketing campaign is successful, it takes time to churn that data and then get that data. And it means that especially if you're starting out from the beginning, it means that it takes a while for you to make a decision. And for something that you normally naturally do in an instant, having to now wait 1 or 2 days for data to come before you make a decision can feel very unnatural. And you just think, why? We normally put this money there and that money there, and we just kind of get sales. But now to feel like, I have to wait for the data to come through before I make a decision, can be a difficult culture shift. So it's just a case so big companies have a massive problem in having to change an entire organization's culture shift, but it's definitely doable. And there are definitely sensible ways for them to do that. And how I've seen it work successfully is sort of doing it in batches, maybe focusing on a team or focusing on a sector. And then obviously when those success stories comes in, you might find on the team saying, hey, I want to bolster my sales like that team. Or, hey, I want to have more free time because that team is using some automation to help them get through this much more quickly. So I guess, again, back to that whole patience thing, it's definitely doable as long as the right steps are taken and the right time and effort is put in. But it's exceptionally difficult for big businesses to pull that off.
So when you said that it's so when somebody's seeing the effects of data and how, okay, for example, that them being more data driven and leading to more sales, things like that. So do you think that that means that like collectively it would be more beneficial if more companies were more outspoken about the impacts of their data, like in the media, or just like even like a LinkedIn post from their team, or just like it seems like that kind of I don't know, evangelism almost from companies on the company side can actually do really well for the whole continent in terms of understanding and even just seeing concrete examples of what it can really do for them?
Yeah. So the challenge though is when a company has put in the effort and time to really benefit from data, they like to keep that secret. Oh, now we're able to be more efficient because now we know how to use data. I'm not going to tell my competitors to let them know that we're a data-driven organization, unless I can use it to benefit, unless I can use it to leverage the business. So if I am a startup, yes, I'm more than happy to boast that I'm applying data to these problems because that boosts my valuation, helps me with subsequent rounds and attract business and attract talent. But if you're a big organization that doesn't really need that, awareness and marketing statement, then you wouldn't necessarily be singing it on top of the roof. But the responsibility actually falls more on the data vendors. I've seen a lot of companies do a very good job promoting how they use data. The one that comes to mind immediately is IBM. There's so many marketing campaigns that they do around how they apply data to sports, how do they apply data to businesses, how they apply data to unusual circumstances, and even I remember reading from IBM a post of what they think data will do in the future and how data will grow and mature. So I think this, if there needs to be sort of a call to arms, if you like, of why it's great to be data driven, it's really the software vendors and the practitioners like us to lead the charge. But you can't always expect the companies to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you on that one. Because what I've seen, a lot of market research companies are actually really, really good when it comes to spreading the word in terms of what is it that they've been doing with the data and how and predicting the direction of the world, at least in the next few years and few months and all this kind of stuff, given the state of which we're at the moment. A lot of market research companies actually do that. But I just feel like that's their way of actually marketing themselves in any way possible, right? Because they actually rely on data to market their brands and all this kind of stuff, and also help out their clients in terms of making decisions and all this kind of stuff. But however, from a client perspective, I honestly haven't seen your big clients or Coke, whatever, actually advertising different things, different insights that they've actually found from at least at Nielsen, IBM, and all those kind of, and all those other market research companies, of which that's something that they really need to actually start doing. But of course, I think it actually gives them a competitive advantage, right? But then if the more of them actually doing that, it will actually turn into a game theory in any way possible. That if I actually advertise how my data is actually working for me and all those kind of stuff, it means that I don't really lose anything in any way possible. So those are the things that, to be quite honest with you, I think companies need to actually now start looking at. And also just to give an opportunity for smaller companies, or rather the startups, in any way possible. And I think not only from a corporate perspective, I think that's something that even the government also needs to keep an eye on that. I mean, I to be quite honest with you, I saw a poor representation in terms of how the numbers are actually looking like on different things. I mean, when the stats data came out within the unemployment rate in South Africa, that for me, I felt like there's more that we need to do. We have a lot of data science professionals within South Africa. At least the government needs to at least make use of those guys, and not only the corporate, the private corporate sectors actually doing that. So yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think maybe they would need to go like that in depth in terms of saying, okay, this is what the data has done for us. These we've done forecasting. This is what we're anticipating. But I think definitely just sharing on a high level perspective in terms of their experience with the data and sort of like where they believe that they're moving towards. I think when companies start doing that, it can, open up a lot of discussions and certain opportunities for companies as well, because someone will comment, oh, wow, you did this. This is how I actually leveraged from it. So I think it wouldn't hurt. But it doesn't mean that they have to go in depth, but just on a high level perspective going forward, because we are evolving, data science is evolving as well. Everything is changing. So we also just need to adapt and, be able to accept change and innovation.
To wrap things up, like a question to everyone. For Khanyisa, what do you see as the biggest challenges that the banking sector faces in terms of data science or leveraging data? And the same would apply to Dumebi from the Nigerian perspective and Rafia from the market research perspective.
Okay, so one of the things is what Dumebi touched upon. It's to say that, for your organizations like your banking, they already have structures, they already have regulations put in place. So, when something new like data science comes, it kind of like takes a process for them. And as much as it's a process, in a way, they are falling behind. So I definitely think that one of the challenges is that gap in terms of understanding where we are currently at from a data perspective and sort of employing the right skills with the right mindsets to get you where you need to be from a data science and a data analytics, a data engineering perspective, because really it's something that we need to incorporate. It's an investment. It's a corporate investment, data in itself, because of all the insights that you can get and everything like that. So I think the strategy has also been that, and also the shortage in terms of where leadership is at and where the people with the right skills are at. I don't think that they are sort of like moving in the same direction. And I just think that conversations need to be had, and yeah, so that people can get to where everyone needs to be. So yeah.
Yes, so looking at sort of the financial services within Nigeria, the challenge comes from the expectation to use data science and data to solve a difficult problem. Because obviously banks in Nigeria are, they're relatively profitable. They understand their business, they understand their market, but they're obviously not serving the mass market. The only way you can service the mass market is to leverage data fully and extensively. And that's very difficult, right? Now, can I advocate that banks should put in the time, effort, and expenses to be able to do that? I mean, from a business, but from a growth perspective, definitely, because the more banks can serve the mass market, the better it is for the community. More people have access to credit, more people have access to financial services, and then that generally bolsters the economy and growth. But from a business perspective, it may not necessarily be beneficial to a bank. Banks might say, right, it's going to take a lot of time for me to learn how to offer credit to bottom of the pyramid or those without any data footprint. I will have to make a lot of mistakes, and it's going to be very expensive. It's going to cost me a lot of time. And so from a business perspective, particularly in the short term, you find that bank may not be able to justify that cost. But the good news is that regulation, particularly in Nigeria, has forced banks to have to look at serving more of the underserved market. Maybe not the entire underserved market, but more of them. And I think only recently are you seeing banks partnering with fintech that allow them to get more data, to generate more connectivity to other data points, to then apply that to some elements of data science. Still a lot of work to be done, a lot of work. And in a way, banks are kind of falling behind some of the smaller institutions who are focusing primarily on the underserved market. And some of them are also trying to encroach on the served market as well. So, but it's happening, but there's still a long way to go. I guess what would accelerate that process is when banks really take that on more profoundly, when they do really see the value of growing into the underserved market. And if they don't, there are other ways they can still provide support. So maybe partnering with companies that do serve the underserved market, and partnering could mean providing more data, because obviously banks have a lot of visibility that southern fintech companies and small financial companies don't have. So if I cannot serve this person, maybe you can, and here's data that you can use to serve that person. That way you can offer them loans that I can't offer because it's too costly for me to do so or learn from, or offer them other financial services that I can offer them because, again, they're in a too difficult of a position for me to collect the data to do that. And right now, what's really exciting is that dance and that exploration is happening. Where it's going to end up, I can't tell. But the good news is that the ecosystem, particularly in Nigeria, is growing with a lot of financial services companies that are taking on these challenges. I mean, if you were to look at the fastest growing industry within sort of the startup community, is definitely fintech, and banks are feeling that pressure. So maybe they could have ignored it up until now, that opportunity, but obviously now they're seeing it. And a lot of them are trying their best to work out how to stay in the game and how to service that market. So it's all kind of happening, and it's all going through the right steps. So hopefully, in no matter of time, you're going to see banks doing the right things with data to serve more of the market.
So I think in my end, I mean, from a market research perspective, I could only think of three things that I think we need to now improve on. First of all would be legacy, the data integrity, and also managing expectations. I mean, by legacy, I'm talking about a lot of market research companies have been having a lot of people that have been working within those companies for the longest time. Most of those people don't really want to change the way that they actually do different things, because when looking at it from a market research perspective, everything follows a certain process. It doesn't really matter which company you're working at, IRI, Nielsen, Genex, whatever company that you might actually think about. First of all, the data collection, coding whatever the data that you're actually getting, making sure that everything is actually quite correct, designing your sample, making sure that actually your sample is actually reflecting your overall population and all those kind of stuff. But the times have changed in any way possible. We're looking at different ways to actually do different things, different ways to actually collect the data and all those kind of stuff. So the moment that we actually make sure that we lose track in terms of the legacy, saying that, I mean, moving far away from the fact that this is how we actually been doing things. This is how we've been doing things, and it's been working for us. Sometimes that doesn't really work, purely based on the time that we're at the moment. So those are the things that we actually need to now focus on and try to make sure that we bring in innovation within that aspect. Another thing is that when looking at it from managing expectation perspective, I mean, market research companies actually, of course, there's actually the main aim is to please their clients and all those kind of stuff. But looking at it from a data science perspective within market research, we need to now get to a point wherein we actually manage the expectation between our client servicing team and also the clients in general, not to actually over promise in terms of what we could actually deliver. I mean, there's only a little that we could actually do purely based on the resources that we actually have currently in South Africa, or rather in Africa in general. So those are the things that we need to now take a little bit step back and try understand what we have. Does it actually really work in terms of what we're actually trying to achieve and all those kind of stuff? And if maybe we are trying to enhance our product, which other ways of which we could actually do that, and make sure that we actually manage our expectations in terms of what we could actually in terms of what we could actually do. But however, I've been seeing a lot of improvements when it comes to that, because those are the points that we've been trying to address, and I really do hope that different people will actually jump in and try to actually address those things so that we could actually move towards the right direction.
All right, thank you all for that was a good mix. That was a good mix of answers. So thank you all for your time. I think this was very informative. I think I personally learned some things that are good to know. So yeah, thanks everybody.